here we are, somehow already doing another reading wrap up, and I somehow managed to read 14 books in October, which I did not expect. I had 13 books on my TBR, and I read 14. Granted, 2 of them were not on my TBR, and one of the books on my TBR I didn't get to. I thought I would just quickly go through the books that I read and share my rating for them as well. So first off, I read Gothic Hannah by Runix on my Kobo. This one was a dark romance, and it was presented to me as Dracula meets Beauty and the Beast. I don't fully agree with that. There were dark aspects that can potentially align with either of those stories, but it's not exactly how I would describe it. I would think it more of like a paranormal dark romance. Anyway, it was so bad it was good. I rated this one 3 stars. The writing was absolutely atrocious, but I still couldn't find myself wanting to stop reading it, so it was pretty good. Would I recommend it? Is dark, steamy, super smutty, lacking plot kind of romance your thing? Because if it is, sure. If it's not, probably would not. Then I listened to the audiobook for Thinner by Stephen King / Richard Bachman, because this was written under his pen name Richard Bachman. This audiobook was narrated by Joe Mantegna, and he did a phenomenal job at narrating this audiobook. I need more audiobooks narrated by Joe Mantegna. Amazing. He did such a good job. So this one I rated 4 stars. It definitely wasn't my favorite by Stephen King, and I've read quite a few Stephen Kings at this point. This one started off very good, but kind of fell flat towards the end. I didn't mind the ending as far as Stephen King goes, because he's notorious for controversial endings, but it just kind of got a little repetitive, and the end couldn't come soon enough for me when I was about 3/4 of the way through, so I ended up rating it 4 stars because of that. Still pretty good, but just not my favorite Stephen King. Then I read The Complete Poetry of Edgar Allan Poe. This one was an absolute shock to me because the only Poe I'd ever been exposed to prior to this was The Raven, so I was expecting all of his poetry to be along the lines of that one, and it is not. A lot of his poetry is still very haunting, but it's also very sad and romantic and very beautiful. A lot of it is poems that he wrote to people that he lost throughout his life, and they were absolutely tragic, but I really loved this collection and it really surprised me because of that, so I ended up rating it 4 stars. I loved most of the poetry in here. There were a few that I probably wouldn't ever read again, but I think my favorite was definitely Annabel Lee, and I can for sure see myself just picking this up solely to read that poem. Then I finally read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Oh my gosh. I'm devastated that I took this long to read this book. It is so good. Like, worth the hype, 100%. No description will do this book justice. I think you should just read it for yourself. This book was absolute perfection to me. I would not change a single thing, and I honestly think this is probably one of the best books I've ever read. Definitely one of my new favorites, and so obviously it's 5 stars. Then I've got this collection of poetry called Poems Bewitched and Haunted. It was decent. There were some of them that were spooky, and if I pictured it being read in like a creepy old witch voice, it was a really fun time, but some of them just kind of missed for me and they were a little boring or lackluster. So because of that, I rated it 3 stars. I thought that was kind of a fair rating because some were definitely 5 stars and others were definitely like 1 to 2 stars. Then I reread Twistwood Tales by A.C. McDonald. This one is such a little cutesy gem. I love it so much. If you are at all into Fangs or Cryptid Club or anything like in that sort of vein, I highly recommend this one because it is very similar humor, very dark but cute and punny at the same time too. Such a good time and still 5 stars to me. Then I read Suburban Hell by Maureen Kilmer on my Kobo. This one was a complete shock to me. I was not expecting it to be 5 stars, but it was. It was really good, really funny. Actually really reminded me of Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires meets My Best Friend's Exorcism. There was a lot of humor, but like with gore mixed into it, just like a Grady Hendrix. And I also really enjoyed the ending of this one. As far as horror novels go, it had a very good ending. Then naturally I had to read Fangs by Sarah Anderson. 5 stars, of course. Once again, dark, punny humor, and it's only 100 pages long, and it is the cutest little comic strips of a werewolf and vampire couple. And I just love this one so much. This was my 2nd time reading this one this year, and I could go for a 3rd, I'm not gonna lie to you. Then I got 64% of the way through When Life Gives You Vampires by Gloria Duke, and I DNF'd it because this book was horrible. Well, the writing was horrible. The concept, really cool. woman wakes up after a night out drinking only to find out she's been turned into a vampire. That sounds really cool, right? Yeah, the writing, not so cool. Her inner monologue was in slang and abbreviations, which got old very, very quickly. I don't even know why I tried to get through that book. I knew I wanted to DNF it by 20%, but I kept going and thought I could power through it, and by 64% I was absolutely defeated and very disappointed by this one, honestly. I had a lot of high hopes going into it. It sounded like it was going to be a really fun vampire rom-com. No. Then I read the graphic novel for Carmilla by Amy Chu and Sue Lee. So this is not the original story of Carmilla, it's a modern take on it, like Carmilla hundreds of years after the original. And I ended up rating this one 3 stars. It was good and the art style was absolutely breathtaking, but the plot felt like it was missing pieces and it definitely felt like it needed to be longer and more like fleshed out. Apparently there is a sequel now, so I'm curious to kind of see what happens to the characters, but I was also reading reviews and I guess people who were kind of meh on this one really didn't like the second one, so I'm kind of torn whether or not I actually want to read it. I have not decided yet on that one, but this one was all right. Then I read The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix, and this has got to be my least favorite Grady Hendrix that I've read. So I had very high expectations going into it because the other 2 that I've read by him were 5 stars to me, and I really enjoyed his writing. This one, I did not enjoy his writing, and at the end of every chapter throughout this book, there's like little magazine clippings and pieces from police interviews and stuff like that. They kind of ripped me out of the story, and some of them just didn't feel very relevant, particularly ones that were about fictional horror movies that took place in this universe. Not my favorite. I did rate it 3 stars, but I can't ever see myself picking this one up again. And I'm definitely very let down by this one. I had really high expectations going into it, and it did not deliver, unfortunately. Then I reread Cryptid Club by Sarah Anderson. Once again, 5 stars. Such a fun time, in the same vein of Fangs and Twistwood Tales. Super cute and dark and gothic, but so funny. Then I read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies by Seth Grahame-Smith. This was a no from me. I wish I would have DNF'd it, but I thought I should power through it. It should be called Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and Ninjas because there are ninjas in this, which made no sense to me, but here we are. I did not enjoy Seth Grahame-Smith's writing. Jane Austen's portions were beautiful, of course. His, not so much. I can appreciate what people see in this, and I really wanted to like it, but unfortunately I couldn't. It's just not for me. The writing style was not for me. And then last but definitely not least, I read an arc called Deadstream by Mar Ramasco Moore, and this one was 5 stars. I was really nervous going into it because it is a YA thriller / horror, and I was kind of getting the vibe that it could turn into a teen detective sort of trope, but it did not, and it was so well written, so much fun. It is about a 17-year-old girl who does live streaming and also loves watching live streams, and as she's watching the live stream of a very popular streamer, a dark figure kind of shows up in the background of his stream, and really spooky things start happening to him as well as other streamers and the main character. This book was so much fun. It is written like a normal book, but there's also like comment threads and chat room things in it and stuff like that. So if you are into like live streams and like YouTube and stuff like that, I highly recommend this one. If you're not, I probably wouldn't recommend this one just because I feel like it would just be confusing, but this book was such a good time. I also must say that the main character has anxiety and the author portrayed her anxiety so well. It was a very accurate representation. Definitely, if you're interested in that one, check it out. I think it comes out in April of 2025. October was such a great reading month for me. I can only hope November is going to be just as good. But anyway, I think I'm going to leave this one here. I hope you have a great rest of your week and happy reading.